Police sealed this case with one warning: do not reopen. But every 10 years, the same disappearance happens again, and the file keeps growing on its own. What investigators discovered inside was never meant to be heard, and once you hear it, the case doesn't let go. In the basement of the Ridgeway City police station, there was a records room few officers liked to enter. The lights flickered, the air smelled of dust and rust, and the silence felt heavy, as if the room was holding its breath. At the far end stood an old metal filing cabinet, taller than the rest, darker in color, its surface covered in deep scratches. Unlike the others, it was always locked. Inside that cabinet was a single red file. Across its cover, written by hand in thick black marker, were the words, "Do not reopen." There was no case number, no date, and no official stamp, just that warning. Over the years, many officers noticed it, but none dared to ask too many questions. In the police station, curiosity had consequences. The file belonged to a case from November 1987. Official records claimed it had been solved quickly, but no one could explain how. The case involved the Harper family, Daniel Harper, his wife Susan, and their 2 children, Emily and Jacob. They lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood where nothing ever happened. That is why the night they vanished shook the entire city. According to the last confirmed details, the Harpers were having dinner at home. A neighbor across the street remembered checking the time when the Harper house lights suddenly went out. It was exactly 11:47 p.m. At first, no one thought much of it. Power cuts were common back then. But the lights never came back on. The next morning, Susan Harper's sister came to visit and found the front door unlocked. Inside, everything was perfectly normal and deeply wrong. Plates of food were still on the dining table, untouched but still warm. The television was paused mid-scene. Shoes were neatly placed by the door. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, no broken windows. The only sound came from the bathroom. Their dog was locked inside, trembling, its paws scratched raw against the door. Police searched the house from top to bottom. They found no fingerprints that didn't belong to the family, no forced entry, no weapons. It was as if the Harpers had stood up and walked out together, without taking keys, coats, or even their children's school bags. Detective Alan Crowe was assigned as lead investigator. He was known as calm, logical, and difficult to scare. But co-workers later said he changed after the Harper case. He stopped joking. He worked late nights alone. Sometimes he was seen staring at the evidence board without moving for hours. 2 weeks into the investigation, Crowe requested that the case be sealed. No explanation was given. The request was approved within minutes by someone higher up, someone no one ever saw. 3 months later, Detective Crowe resigned. 3 months after that, he was found dead in his apartment, seated at his desk, with the Harper case file open in front of him. The official cause of death was a heart attack. The same day, the red file was placed into the locked cabinet, and no one was ever supposed to open it again. In the summer of 2015, the Ridgeway City police station accepted a new group of interns to help modernize its outdated record system. Among them was 22-year-old Lisa Moreno, a quiet but determined criminal justice student who believed that every case, no matter how old, deserved clarity. She was assigned to the basement records room, a place most officers avoided unless absolutely necessary. Lisa spent her first few days scanning dusty files and labeling forgotten cases. While cross-checking digital entries with physical records, she noticed something strange. Entire months from the late 1980s were missing. No case numbers, no reports, no explanations. When she casually mentioned it to a senior clerk, the woman froze, then quickly changed the subject. The silence only made Lisa more curious. One evening, she stayed late to finish her work. The basement was nearly empty, the hum of old fluorescent lights echoing through the narrow aisles. That was when she noticed the tall, rusted cabinet at the back of the room. It was darker than the others, and a small red sticker marked its lock. Something about it felt wrong, as if it didn't belong there. Lisa asked her supervisor about it the next day. He frowned and told her to ignore it. "Some files aren't meant to be revisited," he said, ending the conversation. That night, she returned to the cabinet. Behind a loose shelf panel, Lisa found a small key taped with yellowing adhesive. Her hands shook as she unlocked the cabinet. Inside was a single red file, thicker than expected. On the cover were the words she had seen from across the room: "Do not reopen." She opened it anyway. The documents inside were unsettling. Witness statements were incomplete, some lines aggressively crossed out. Evidence photographs were missing. Timestamps didn't match. Pages were out of order, as if someone had rushed to hide something rather than erase it properly. Near the end of the file, Lisa found a handwritten note signed by Detective Alan Crow. "This case cannot be solved the way we understand solving. The more we learn, the more it adapts. If this file is ever reopened, it means it has already noticed." Before Lisa could process the meaning of those words, the lights in the records room shut off. The hum of electricity died instantly, leaving her in complete darkness. Her computer screen went black, and the air grew unnaturally cold. Then the printer across the room came to life. It began printing without any command. The sound was slow and deliberate. When Lisa approached and pulled the page free, her heart stopped. Printed neatly in black ink was her full name. Beneath it was a timestamp, 11:47 p.m. Panicking, Lisa gathered the file and rushed upstairs. By the time she reached the lobby, the power had returned, and everything appeared normal. No alarms, no reports of an outage. The next morning, the red file was back in the cabinet. Locked. As if it had never left. But Lisa knew better. And from that moment on, she understood one thing clearly. Whatever the file contained did not want to stay buried. Lisa could not forget what she had read. The red file, the note, the printer turning on by itself. None of it felt like coincidence. When the file mysteriously returned to the cabinet, locked as before, she realized that the police station itself was part of the secret. If she wanted answers, she would have to look outside official channels. Over the next several days, Lisa worked in silence, pretending to scan harmless records while secretly collecting names, dates, and locations from the fragments she remembered. At home, she spread the notes across her kitchen table, carefully arranging them by year. That was when a disturbing pattern began to appear. The Harper family was not alone. Lisa discovered at least 9 other disappearances that shared the same details. Entire families vanished without warning. No forced entry. No signs of violence. In every case, dinner was left unfinished, and clocks in the house stopped at the same moment, 11:47 p.m. The cases were scattered across different states and decades, making them easy to dismiss as unrelated. But the timing was too perfect. The disappearances occurred roughly every 10 years, 1967, 1977, 1987, 1997, and so on. Each case had been handled quietly, closed early, and sealed. The lead investigators shared another strange detail. Every one of them had suffered a sudden personal collapse shortly after working the case. Some resigned without notice. Some disappeared entirely. A few were reported dead from natural causes at unusually young ages. Lisa felt a growing sense of dread as she realized what this meant. The system had not failed to connect the cases. It had actively prevented anyone from doing so. Digging deeper, she found something even more unsettling. All the houses where the families vanished had been built by the same construction company, Northline Developments. The company no longer existed. It had gone bankrupt in the early 1990s after a series of unexplained lawsuits and safety violations that were later erased from public records. Lisa located an old zoning map and noticed that many Northline properties were built on land that had once been restricted by the federal government. The restriction was lifted quietly in the 1960s with no public explanation. Buried in archived planning documents was a vague reference to acoustic testing limitations. One phrase appeared repeatedly in classified memos she managed to access through a university database. Listening ground. The listening ground was a Cold War-era research site rumored to have been used for experimental surveillance. According to fragments of declassified reports, scientists believed certain underground structures could store and amplify sound in ways that allowed long-term monitoring of human behavior. The project was officially shut down due to ethical concerns. But Lisa began to suspect it was never truly abandoned. What terrified her most was not the technology itself, but the possibility that it had changed, that it no longer needed machines to listen, that it had learned how families spoke, how they lived, how they trusted their homes. Late one night, as Lisa reviewed her notes, she noticed something new. Her apartment building had been constructed in 1996 by Northline Developments. She looked up at the ceiling and held her breath. From inside the walls, she thought she heard a faint echo, almost like someone repeating her thoughts just a second too late. Lisa returned to the red file in her mind again and again, trying to remember every detail she had seen before it vanished from her hands. One item stood out clearly, a cassette tape tucked into the back pocket of the file. At the time, she had been too shaken to focus on it. Now, she knew it might be the most important piece of all. Using her university access, Lisa searched storage records linked to old evidence transfers. After hours of digging, she found it. The tape had been mislabeled and stored in a sealed evidence box marked training materials. Someone had gone to great lengths to make sure it was never played. She borrowed an old cassette player from the media lab and waited until night to listen. The room was quiet, the kind of silence that makes small sounds feel loud. When she pressed play, there was static at first, followed by heavy breathing. Then a man's voice. Lisa recognized it immediately from archived interviews. It was Detective Alan Crow. His voice sounded tired, strained, as if he had not slept in days. He explained that the recording was never meant to be official evidence. "If this gets logged," he said, "they'll erase it, or me." Crow described a discovery made during a second search of the Harper house, one that never appeared in any report. Beneath the basement floor, hidden behind a false concrete panel, officers found a narrow stairway leading down. It did not appear on any building plan. At the bottom was a small room. No doors, no windows, just bare walls covered in deep scratches, as if made by fingernails. Symbols were carved into the concrete, uneven, frantic, and repeated over and over. Crow admitted that none of the symbols matched any known language. In the center of the room stood a single object, a microphone. It was old, wired directly into the foundation of the house. The cable disappeared into the ground, stretching far beyond the property. Crow said the equipment did not belong to the police, the city, or any private contractor. When they tried to remove it, the power in the house failed instantly. Crow's voice began to shake as he described interviews with the Harper family's neighbors. The Harpers had complained for months about strange sounds. They believed someone was listening to them. At first, the whispers came at night. Later, they came during the day. The voices repeated personal conversations, arguments, secrets, even thoughts spoken only in private. The family had stopped inviting guests over. They said the house felt aware. The final minutes of the tape were the hardest to hear. Crow admitted that after spending time in the room, he began to notice changes in himself. He felt watched even outside the house. He caught himself finishing sentences he had not started. He realized the room was not just recording sound. It was learning behavior. The last sentence on the tape was barely audible. It doesn't force its way in. It listens until you trust it, until you stop locking the door. The tape clicked off. That night, as Lisa lay in bed, she heard a soft tapping inside her apartment wall. Slow, careful, almost patient. And for the first time, she felt certain the recording had not been a warning. It had been a confession. Lisa knew that once she heard the recording, there was no going back. Whatever the truth was, it could not survive inside locked cabinets and erased reports. If the system was designed to bury the case, then the only place left to expose it was the public. Over several sleepless nights, she scanned documents, copied handwritten notes, and converted the cassette audio into digital files. She titled the folder simply, "Do Not Reopen." She uploaded everything to multiple platforms, documents, images, and the distorted audio of Detective Crow's confession. At first, nothing happened. Then the views began to climb. Comments poured in from strangers who claimed similar experiences. Whispers in walls, familiar voices repeating private conversations, unexplained fear inside their own homes. Within hours, the posts vanished. Every account Lisa used was deleted without explanation. Her email stopped receiving messages. Her phone lost signal completely, even though the screen showed full bars. When she tried to access her files, they were gone, as if they had never existed. By morning, men in unmarked uniforms appeared at her university, asking questions no one could answer. Surveillance cameras in the hallway showed static for the exact minutes they questioned her classmates. No official reports were filed. Lisa returned to her apartment feeling watched. The tapping in the walls had grown more frequent, almost rhythmic. As she packed a bag to leave the city, her kitchen lights flickered off. The digital clock on the stove froze. 11:47 p.m. Her phone vibrated once, despite having no service. A single message appeared on the screen, sent from an unknown contact. "We are already inside." The next morning, neighbors reported a strange smell coming from Lisa's apartment. Police forced the door open and found the place undisturbed. Her bag lay half-packed on the bed. Dinner sat cooling on the stove. There were no signs of struggle. Lisa Moreno was gone. The official statement described her disappearance as voluntary, stress-related. Case closed. 2 weeks later, a familiar red file appeared in the locked cabinet at Ridgeway City police station. No one admitted to placing it there. The file was thicker than before. On its cover, written in fresh black ink, were new words. "Do not reopen, last time." Yet officers reported odd changes. Pages seemed to rearrange themselves. New names appeared in the margins. Sometimes, faint audio could be heard when the cabinet was opened, like whispers trapped between paper. Late at night, when the station was quiet, the cabinet drawer was said to slide open by itself. Inside, the file continued to grow. Because the case was not finished. It had moved on from families. It had learned how to follow those who listened. And now, it was no longer waiting to be reopened. It was opening itself.